Welcome to Fostering Faith. My name is Raymond Driscoll. This is my testimony. So, when I was younger, my mom and dad split up when I was, I don't know, probably 5 or so. I think I remember like seeing in my mom's house like crosses and stuff, but I don't ever remember going to church. My sister did say that that I was baptized Catholic. I mean, I don't know how true that is or not. I really just don't ever remember that. So living with my mom, we just kind of bounced around from house to house. She had a lot of boyfriends. So, I mean, nothing was ever really stable. And we lived in California. So, I mean, we lived all over the place, like Northern California. Let's see here. So I ended up, my mom met a guy and we ended up moving to Connecticut. And that's where like my reign of terror pretty much started. I started acting up quite a bit. I wouldn't listen to anybody, including my mom or her boyfriends, who I've always hated. So now I'm in Connecticut. I lived there for a couple of years, and I was just getting in trouble, not listening to her boyfriend at all. And so my mom ended up calling my dad, who I hadn't met. I mean, I knew him when I was probably like younger, obviously, but I don't really remember him. So my mom calls him up and says, you know, either take your son or I'm going to put him in a boys' home. So my dad says, sure, I'll take him. And so my mom puts me on a plane and I go from Connecticut all the way to Oregon. So now I'm in Oregon. And I still have that little terror going on, you know, not wanting to listen to anybody, you know, and this is my dad. I don't really know him. So, I mean, I'm treating him just like my mom's boyfriends. Well, soon my dad really couldn't handle me either. So I started running away from home a lot. That's where I started getting into a lot of trouble, you know, hanging out with the wrong crowd, older people, you know, who I thought were cool, who were doing drugs and drinking a lot. And so I started using, of course, too, because I wanted to be cool, smoking cigarettes and, you know, doing all that stuff. And then the cops would find me and they'd bring me home. And, you know, my dad would just simply tell him, you know, I can't control him, you know, he's just, you know, he's not listening. And, that and my dad wasn't a very good positive role model either. He was big into drugs as well. And the state kind of already knew that. And so at this time now I'm on probation. And my PO took me out of my dad's house and he put me into foster care. And it was called an independent living program. And it's where they pretty much just teach younger people how to live on their own and how to, you know, be a member of society, whatever that means back then, right? And so I was like, yeah, well, you know, that really isn't for me. So of course I ran away from it. And I just get placed at different homes. I remember like a building that was just like the main office where, you know, like the foster families would have me during the day, and then the foster families would have me at night. And during the day, I would be in this big building, like an office building with other kids playing with toys and stuff. And I really didn't like it, but I couldn't really run from that. Let's see. So later on in life, probably about age 14, I get sent to a lady named Kathy Shea's house. And Kathy Shea was just a really big positive influence on me. She was really deep in her faith. She was a Christian lady. Her only rule for us was that she would like us to go to church, but we had to pick whatever church we wanted to go to. We didn't have to go to her church, but we just had to go to a church. So I ended up picking Sandy Assembly of God, started going there, met the youth pastor. His name was Chris, really good guy, became like what I thought was my best friend, you know, but I mean, of course, it's probably that nice to everybody, but we would do like little gatherings at his house, and it was really fun. You know, I just remember sitting, you know, Indian style with my socks, you know, it was really cool. Cause I mean, I'd never been in a house where you had to take your shoes off before you entered. So I thought it was really cool for some weird reason. But so then one day, Pastor Chris came in and he said, you know, God's calling him to do something bigger in his life. So he was leaving the country to go do what God called him to do. And so once again, I get close to somebody and they just get ripped away from me, and so I was really sad about that. So I'm just kind of like, God, why'd you do this to me? You finally let, a male figure, come into my life that I really liked. And now you're just going to tear him away from me. It was kind of like the only father figure really I really had, that was positive in any way. And so I was really angry with God. Like, why me? Like, why do I deserve this? Like bouncing around all the time, I finally get close to somebody and you rip them away. So I really felt like there's no hope for myself, or, God was just a real jerk, and so I just kind of gave up the whole church thing. And so there I was back in group homes again, running around, running away from them. They finally, my probation officer says, we're going to send you to a work program called Klamath Lake County Youth Ranch, Southern Oregon. And it was out in the middle of nowhere, so I couldn't run. And it was like a labor intensive place. So like we had to chop down trees and stuff. It was really harsh, but I mean, I liked it. And so after that, I think a couple days before my 18th birthday, I got out of there and got to go back to my dad's. My dad was still doing bad. He was still drinking heavily and doing drugs, of course. And a buddy of mine was moving to Montana, so I decided to get out of Oregon and go with him. So that's how I ended up here in Montana, where I am today. But of course, the kid in me was still getting in trouble. So I get to Montana, had a job, was still getting in trouble, still drinking. I wasn't using then, but I was definitely drinking. Let's see. So just bouncing around, I guess, from home to home, not really having a stable place to live. It's same as, I was in Oregon as a kid, just bouncing around. And so I finally meet a friend, and his name is Gerard. And he says, well, why don't you just come stay with me and my family? Like, we have a big family. So I was like, oh, all right, cool. Well, he lived in Valier, Montana, which is really far away from anywhere I've ever known. And so I get there, and his mom, Dr. DeRozier, she was a doctor on the Indian reservation. She goes, I only have two requirements for you. You either have to work or go to school. And so I said, okay, well, I'd like to go back to school. So at this point, I'm like, I think 19 years old. And so I go back to school. I graduated at age 20. The only way I could go to school is if Dr. DeRozier were to adopt me. So that's the only time I was ever actually adopted. So it kind of felt good, to be actually a part of like an actual family. Man. So yeah, so I mean, I call my dad all the time, still on the phone. We would watch Price is Right together, or so he thought. We would just, hey, it's a new car. It was really cool. Anyway, my dad told me to call him back at noon, and so I get off the phone with him, call him back at noon. He doesn't answer, and so I was just like, oh well, he's probably busy. And so Dr. DeRozier, I think it was later that day or the next day, she comes up to me and she tells me that my father had passed away. And I called her a liar. I called her all the names in the book. Like, you don't know my dad. How would you know this information? You don't know who my family is. Like, how would they contact you? Just really upset, bawling my eyes out, not thinking it was true. And she's swearing up and down it's true. So I took off and ran as fast as I could out of her house. Like, I hated her. Like, why would you say that to me? And I get in front of this big church. I think it might have been a Catholic church, but I'm not sure. And I dropped down in front of the little statues that they had out there. And I just started bawling, hitting the ground, punching it like, God, if you're real, then why would you do this? Like, why would you take my father away from me? Like, that was my best friend, He wasn't a good father, but he was my best friend. He was always there for me, whenever I called or whatever. And I was so, so angry. And come to find out, my dad really did pass away, by the way. So yeah, I was just hating him. And I mean, how could all these bad things happen to me? Me drinking, me, losing my dad, me losing my pastor friend, me, not having a stable house, bouncing around here and there and going through foster care and all this stuff. Like, why would he put us through all that stuff? These are the questions I'm asking myself, is why? And, we're just children, like I couldn't fathom like why anyone would put anybody through that. So I didn't even make it to my graduation. I did graduate, but I ended up taking off, and I ended up in Great Falls, Montana, where I turned to alcohol. Alcohol is my comfort. I drink all the time, and throughout this whole time, I've never had a driver's license. So I'm getting pulled over a lot by the police, going to jail for not having a driver's license. So, I was in and out of jail probably more than 20 times. Soon, once you're declared, it's called a habitual offender. Once you're a habitual offender, they start giving you 30 days at a time in jail. And so this was like a huge shock to me. 30 days in jail, that's like a lifetime when you're in there. Like, wow, like, every minute's like a day in there. And so like I had no place to turn other than the Bible. It's the only book that was really around. So I really started reading it and connecting with some of the other guys that were in there that were reading it as well. And I found a lot of comfort, like a lot of comfort in the Bible. And there are so many answers in the Bible to why things happen to us. And like God tests you so much and puts you through so many miserable things to prove different points. And it just kind of resonated with me. Like this is why I had to go through all that, just because God wanted me to focus on him. And so I would get out and I would drink and I get in trouble and I'd get a DUI even. And it seemed like my life was on this straight road. And then I would detour and I'd go way left or I'd go way right. But as soon as I got too far, like out of bounds, God grabbed me and put me right back in jail, right back on that road where I'm supposed to be on, right where I'm reading the book again. And it was like a giant reset every time I went to jail. And surprisingly, jail's no fun, but I definitely found comfort in knowing that I wasn't alone. God was in there. Like this is the only place I could find him, it seemed like. So going in and out of jail throughout all this time, here I am going, through my 20s and, coming up on my 30s. And, I still didn't learn my lesson. I went to prison for drugs and found God again in prison and read the book all the time. Got out, was doing great for a long time, self-sabotaged again. And, back in the drugs again. I went to prison the second time. The second time I said, you know what, I'm not going to read the Bible. Forget it. I know God's up there. I know he's real. I had a real good connection with him in jail and when I was a child, but just forget about it this time. Like I really wanted to go through this by myself. And so I did. And I'm currently at a place right now. It's called a pre-release center. And some other places call it a halfway house, but it's for a place for felons to come after they get out of prison to kind of help acclimate themselves back into the community so they could, get a job and, learn how society works again. Because, a lot of those guys are in prison for years and years and years. Thankfully, I was only in prison the first time for 2 years and this time a year. But like I said, I am in a pre-release center now. And so, now I've picked back up the book. I do, daily Bible studies with Ryan even. And, we hit it hard. It's actually pretty cool. We could relate to so much stuff. Now that my eyes are open, there's so many stories in there where I'm just like, wow, that sounds kind of like my story. Except for theirs was obviously way worse, because it was so long ago. It seems like everything back then was way worse. So yeah, that was just, my whole life has really just been like a reign of terror, it seems like. But God's always been in my life. And, even throughout all the struggles and the hard times that I've been through and what God's put me through, I know that he's done it for a purpose. And I think one of those purposes is what I'm doing now. Sharing my story with all you guys, I hope resonates with somebody, to realize that, no matter how bad your life is, God's using that for a purpose. You could do anything you want to do in life. Just reset, start over. It's so simple. When I was younger, it seemed so hard. Like, really reset? Like, this is the hardest thing in the world to do. but it's really not. It's literally just resetting. And that's where I'm at today. Resetting, I'm back on the right path and doing a lot of good things. That's my testimony, I suppose. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I want to say thank you for sharing. I think you did really good. And like you said, I too love doing the Bible studies with you. You've grown a lot. But one thing that I really can relate to when it comes to your story is all of a sudden the eyes being opened. You know, God, like you, like me, every time I went to jail, it felt like I was being put in timeout, like he did it on purpose. And I always look at it, you said that you would go back to jail and you'd find God again. And honestly, I would look at it more that God put you in jail so he could reconnect you with you again. And so it's all done for his purposes. Now, the things that we experience, both good and bad, all have purpose within it. And just like the Bible tells us, you know, he's the potter and we're the clay and he's molding us, you know. And so for one, I've never been a piece of clay, so I don't know how it feels to be molded. But I mean, as a person, if somebody started mushing on me like that, probably doesn't feel good. But both eternally, mentally, all of it, it takes pressure. And I mean, just like diamonds, everything else. And so we're faced with all these trials on a daily basis that God allows because it helps produce character within us. We have the choice of being a burden or a blessing. And so I look at both your story and mine as one where God walked us through the dark side of what the world is experiencing, because the world is broken right now. It's severely hurting. And there's a lot of people out there that feel that nobody understands. Well, now God is building people like us, an army of people that understand the brokenness, the torment the devil puts on people, and the chaos that ensues with the battle that goes on in your mind. And so we have power. And I look at all of our brokenness, you know, the fact that we've both been to jail, have felonies, things like this. We've experienced the dark side of life. And of course, there's choices I wish back in the day would have happened differently, but hindsight's 2020. And there's some of my biggest lessons were the hardest broken situations that I went through are what gave me the most power that I can go out and help the world with. So I don't look at those as bad days anymore. And so you're a powerful person, and I'm grateful that you're here. I'm grateful that we get to do this together, and your testimony was awesome, man. Like I'm proud of you, and I appreciate it. Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was so powerful. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Kristen.
You did really good.
Thank you, Lacey. Hi, Allie.
Hi.
Well, and it's hard too, you know, with your family situation. I mean, moving away from your mother because of just, I mean, hurting people hurt people, and you were broken and young and experiencing hardship that you couldn't process or understand. And so you reacted in Sue. And so you didn't lose your mom completely, but there you are off with your dad. And then to have all that chaos and end up in Montana and to lose your dad that way, I mean, that's a little piece of family that you did have, even if they weren't yours because someone else told you they couldn't be. You know, they were still your family, even at a distance. And so that's hard when you already feel like you have nobody to lose the last few people that carry the same. I mean, I'm grateful you have your sister. That is awesome. But your mom and your dad, I mean, your blood, and when you have very little family, I mean, it just all of a sudden the world feels a little bit bigger and you feel a little bit smaller, you know? And so there's
definitely does, especially being in Montana with no family. You know, I've been here for so long now, like I couldn't picture myself living anywhere else. Like I've tried to go back to California. It's so busy and it's smoggy and it seems gross to me, you know, coming from Montana, you know, where, you know, the skies are clear. You can get up on, you know, a mountain and look down and see the whole town and see the lights. You know, you do that in California or some of these other bigger cities. It's just smog everywhere. You don't see the, you know, the city or the lights. But I mean, being here, you know, I can't really say I'm here by myself, you know, because I mean, I obviously got you guys, and you guys are like the closest thing to family. And I mean, we've obviously known each other for a super long time. But I mean, technically, you know, I'm in Montana with no blood family, but it doesn't seem odd to me because I've lived my whole life pretty much without family. And so, I mean, yeah, I don't know if that would help anybody resonate, but You know, it's family's not blood. It really isn't. I mean, there are good people who care about other people. There's broken people that care about other broken people. And I'm one of them. I would choose a broken person to help any day of the week before I would help, I think, somebody that has it all.
Yeah. Well, and I really feel like God does a lot of things on purpose, man. Me and Lacey tried to move to Washington. I tried to, for one, I was born in Montana, moved to Seattle, grew up over there, moved to Montana, then tried to go back to Seattle, and God still kept bringing me back. And so there's purpose. There's a reason
Yep.
that we're here, and it was beyond my choices that I came back because it was on a chain from jail to jail. You're going, okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think you did a really good job, buddy, and I appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Worth.